Hello everyone, this is Simon, X-Ray Whiskey Zero Lima Papa in Luang Prabang in North Laos, the beautiful country of Laos. I'm just about the only radio amateur in Laos. I believe there's one other person down in the capital city who does a little bit of CW, but generally I'm the only ham operating in the country. There are no local Lao citizens with ham radio licenses. And I have an HF license and I operate mainly digital modes on the HF bands, all HF bands except for 60 meters. Yeah. Now, what's this little video about? Well, it's all going to be about making a hex beam antenna for 20 meters and up, all the way up to 6 meters. Because of my location, everything's got to be homebrew. There are no electronic shops, and I can't even order anything online because with all the various lockdowns because of coronavirus, nothing gets into the country. So to make this hex beam, I've got to rely totally on local materials that I can find around my garden or in the shops, and see if we can make a hex beam that's going to look professional and do the job. So let's see where we start. So this is where we start. Right, first thing we need to do is to find a material or find something to make the hub for the hex beam antenna. So I looked around and I found this. This is, it's actually, if I show you, look, it's a drum of cable. It's actually internet drop cable, fiber optic drop cable, or the last drop, that was left behind by the company who installed my fiber optic line, my internet connection. And you can get an idea of how big it is. Yeah, it's probably about 30 centimeters diameter, hole in the middle. Of course, you've got another piece at the other side of this drum. What I'm going to do is take the two sides off, the two end pieces off, bolt them together, and see if that makes a plate, a center plate that's strong enough, robust enough to hold the spreaders for my hex beam. So let's get my spanners and pliers and take this cable drum to pieces, see what we get. Right, now there we are. I've managed to take the cable drum to pieces. There's all the cable, which I'll keep. Yeah, might be useful for something in the future. And then I've got the two sides, the two end pieces of the drum. I was actually thinking to stick them together somehow, but actually this one seems quite flat and quite strong. Yeah, and I've tried to sort of bend it. It really, the plastic's quite thick, and look, you can see it's sort of it's strengthened with these ribs. So what I'm going to do is use this one for the center hub of my hex beam. This one's got a few cracks in it, so I'll put that on one side. I don't think I'm going to use that, but this I think is going to be strong enough because the hex beam's a very light antenna with a very low wind load, and it doesn't get too windy here. So that's what we'll use. That's what we'll start with. Right. Actually, let's just take a quick break from making the hex beam, just to tell you a little bit about myself, because I guess you probably have worked out that I'm British, and what on earth is a British person doing in the far north of Laos, in Southeast Asia? Very brief rundown of my background. I actually trained at University College London to be a space and satellite systems engineer, design engineer, and I worked for many years in the space industry in Europe, mainly designing antenna systems, antenna control systems for scientific satellites. About 20 years ago, I contracted a lung disease. It's called aspergillosis. Yeah, and it's spread by mushroom spores, fungal spores. The fungal spores get in your lungs, and you usually find those fungal spores in compost heaps. Yeah, and also in very damp, cold offices, which is unfortunately where I contracted that disease. And after suffering for many years with it, my doctor said, look, if you really want your lungs to be healthy and you don't want to have this chronic disease and pneumonia all your life, you need to move to a hot country, a hot and humid country. So I did. And I emigrated from the UK, I went to live in Thailand. Now, unfortunately, in Thailand, there weren't any jobs for rocket scientists like me. So for a time, I built hotels, small hotels on the tourist island of Phuket, and I operated with my Thai ham license, yeah, Hotel Sierra Zero, Zulu India Bravo. And that was all fine. And then I got the opportunity about, this must have been about 2012, to go and work in Myanmar, yeah, in XY country. Now, I'm sure people who know about ham radio and DXing know that it is very difficult to operate from Myanmar, from Burma. They actually passed a law banning ham radio in 1964. There have been de-expeditions, short-term de-expeditions to Burma on quite a few occasions. But if you want to operate there long-term, the only way you could do it, viably way you could do it, which I figured out, was to go and live there. If you want to go and live there, you've got to have a source of income. You know, I'm not rich, so I needed to work. The only kind of job that it's going to be viable for me to do would be as a teacher. And in 2012, it was very difficult for the international schools in Myanmar to find foreign teachers to teach English or to teach science, because actually, to put it bluntly, it wasn't very nice living in Burma, in Myanmar. It was considered a hardship posting, yeah, because there were so many shortages, power cuts, lack of common or garden foodstuffs. Yeah, for me that was a challenge. So I wasn't a teacher. Noisy motorbike. I wasn't a teacher, but I became a teacher. Yeah, and I applied for a job to be an English teacher at a school in Yangon, in the capital, or the old capital city of Myanmar. Yeah, I had a good education, so I thought, well, I should be fine to, and a good accent, a good British accent, I should be able to teach teenage students English. Yeah, so I ended up in Yangon. I ended up at the school on my first day. I asked the principal, the headmistress. Wait a moment. These are kids playing on motorbikes. Yeah, I think they're about 10 years old or something. I hope they keep off the road. We had too many deaths from young kids playing on motorbikes and not wearing crash helmets. Anyway, off they go. I asked the principal, yeah, where's my class of teenage students? And she said, no, you're not teaching teenage students. You're teaching 4-year-olds, kindergarten kids. Now, I've got kids of my own. I've got 4 kids. So I thought, right, well, if I want to stay here, I've got to accept this challenge. And so I started teaching English to 4- and 5-year-old children at this international school in Yangon. And to be honest, it was great fun. Yeah, it was great fun. The salary was pretty reasonable. And although I wasn't a teacher, I found I was quite good at teaching. Yeah, and I was in demand for overtime teaching and teaching teenagers, teaching adults. And that was all great. And I thought, now that I'm here in Yangon, I'll apply to get a Burmese ham radio license. Yeah. Well, that was the idea. That was the plan. It took me 6 years of pestering and visiting the licensing department in the capital city, Naypyidaw, and explaining to them what ham radio was, because they had no idea. Yeah, for a whole generation, there was no ham radio except for the very occasional de-expeditions. To improve my chances of getting the license, I actually moved and got a teaching job in Naypyidaw, at the international school in Naypyidaw, and started to make very regular visits and PowerPoint presentations at the licensing department. Finally, I got my ham radio license, X-Ray Zulu 2 Alpha. Yeah, which was the first resident ham radio license issued since 1964. Now, to be honest, it wasn't a license because ham radio was banned, and it's an operating permit, which is a way that the licensing department in Myanmar gets around actually not having to issue a license. Because as I found out, the staff who issue the permit are absolutely petrified of doing something wrong and being punished for it by their superiors. So they made sure that it was a temporary, it's written all over it, temporary permit, with a lot of restrictions, only operating from 20 megahertz and up. Yeah, you might wonder why people generally don't operate on the lower frequencies when they get permission in Myanmar. There are some CW, a couple of Japanese hams who operate occasionally from Naypyidaw in Yangon. The reason is simply that the monitoring, the radio frequency monitoring department in Myanmar, their spectrum analyzer, for monitoring radio transmissions, if they do such a thing, they told me that their receiving antenna only goes down to 20 megahertz. And for that reason, they won't license anything below 20 megahertz. That's if you go the correct, the standard route for applying for a ham radio license. Yeah. Now, I don't want to say too much about this, but the bottom line is if you know the right people in the government or in the Ministry of Telecommunications right at the top, you can get them to simply instruct the licensing staff to issue a ham radio permit for any frequency. Yeah, you maybe get my drift about that in de-expeditions. I didn't know the minister, so I had to go the route from the bottom up, and that worked. And I operated as X-Ray Zulu 2 Alpha from Naypyidaw, and that was great fun. Right, next step in making our hex beam, DIY hex beam. There's the cable drum NPs that I'm going to use to mount the hex beam spreaders on. And what I've done, let me hold it up. I found some PVC water pipe, plastic water pipe, that fits firmly into the outer ring. I've hammered it in there, and it's actually quite solid. And what's this going to be? This part here is going to be to hold the tensioning strings, from the end of the hex beam spreaders. Now, I'm probably going to have to cut this down a bit. You can see it's probably about 1 meter long at the moment, which is far too long. But I won't cut it down just yet. I'll wait until I've sort of optimized it, and then we'll see how it goes. Now, I need some spreaders. Let's see what we can get. Right, spreaders. Now, what on earth have I got here? It's bamboo. Well, in fact, it's the little bits of bamboo leaves that I have cut off. Here you see it. A bamboo pole. Fresh bamboo that grows in my garden. There's a very long piece of bamboo, reasonably straight, reasonably strong. And I've just sawn it off. And I've chopped off all the excess little leaves and branches. I did actually think of leaving them on and constructing the world's first living bamboo hex beam, but I decided it might be difficult to water it. So I've chopped off the side bits, and I'm left with this, here we are. Whoa, look at this. Nice, strong and long spreader, the first one. Oh, by the way, that's my DIY satellite dish, or a surplus satellite dish I use for L-band weather satellite reception with a homemade feed horn antenna. Nothing to do with hex beams, but maybe I'll show you that another time. Look at this. This is quite strong. If you make a hex beam for 20 meters, you need about, after you've tensioned and bent your spreader, it's got to be about 3 meters long. These are 4 meters long. This pole here is 4 meters long. That's got me thinking. I wonder if I could actually build a hex beam that includes 30 meters. Anyway, what I'm going to do is saw off 5 more bamboo spreaders, get them all laid out, get everything ready, and see if it's going to be feasible. If it's not feasible to make a hex beam, a multi-band hex beam with 30 meters, that's fine. I'll go with the usual one that's lowest band 20 meters. But I'm going to see what I can do. So there we are. That's the first DIY spreader for my own bamboo tree in my garden in North Laos. Hello again. Nothing to do with hex beams. Just showing real-time reception on 12 meters. This is using my vertical fan quarter wave wire antennas that I currently use for all bands, including top band and 80 meters. So I'm hoping to change these vertical quarter wave wires for my hex beam, because the hex beam is essentially a 2-element Yagi, so it should hopefully give me a good gain increase and directivity. There we are. Anyway, my apologies. Just to say a little bit more about working as X-ray Zulu 2 Alpha in Myanmar. This worked fine. I have to say that the hotel where I stayed at were also petrified of what I was doing, and I really had to sort of show them my license a lot of times and explain what I was doing, that it was all legal. I don't think they understood what I was doing, but they left me alone, and I was able to operate X-ray Zulu 2 Alpha when I was working as a teacher at the international school in Naypyidaw. And that was all fine. But then a couple of years ago, I got an urge to start to do online teaching, and online teaching was getting quite popular. And so I tried this out, and it worked very well. I was a very popular teacher. The only problem was the internet wasn't very reliable from Burma, from Myanmar. So I made the decision to actually move to end my job in Myanmar, and therefore end my ham radio operations from Myanmar for the moment, yeah, and to return back initially to Thailand, but after a short time I decided to settle in Laos as, let's say, a second choice for ham radio, because there were really no amateur operators in Laos. I knew that getting a license wasn't too difficult. If you spoke Lao and could read Lao language, the process only took a couple of months as opposed to 6 years, and so I was able to do that. And I returned to live in Luang Prabang in northern Laos, yeah, where I used to be the headmaster, the principal of the international school in Luang Prabang. Don't ask how a rocket scientist who built hotels in Phuket was appointed as the principal of an international school. I have no idea. To be honest, I hated the job because I didn't get on well with the school owner, as I was trying to implement all my safety ideas, safety policies, etc. And healthy food policies, such as not eating from the tuck shop. Unfortunately, her sister owned the tuck shop, so my policies and suggestions didn't go down very well. But anyway, I didn't like the job, but I loved Luang Prabang, and that's how I ended up here. Hello again. What I'm going to do, I'll stop these little videos just for the moment so I can put them all together, splice them together and put them up on YouTube. But then I'll make a further, a part 2 YouTube video about how my construction of my hex beam is going. Behind me, you can see maybe high in the sky are 2 vertical antennas. That's my 80 meter and 160 meter verticals, quarter wave verticals. Might be difficult to see. My plans, once I've got this hex beam working for the higher bands, is to try to improve my low band wires. Maybe with something like a Battle Creek Special, but I've got to work that out. That's going to be another project. Anyway, I'm going to put this all together, put it on the internet, on YouTube, and see if anyone's interested. Please do ask me any questions or make comments on the YouTube video. All right, see you soon.